Welcome to War Movie Theatre, where we once travelled with a guide who didn't speak for 9 hours because he was binging on podcasts. Today, we're exploring the desert and the human soul as we watch an Oscar-winning movie that was adapted from a Booker-winning novel. It's got spies, it's got betrayal, it's even based very loosely on a true story. That's right, it's The English Patient. I'm Rob Hutton, and after my thumbs were cut off by the captain from Das Boot, I've made my way to an Italian villa where a podcast has come to die. Here I found a morphine addict with a strange accent who's extremely shifty about exactly how many deaths he's responsible for. Hello, Duncan Weldon.
Hello, Rob.
And mopping his fevered brow is an author, psychotherapist, and the host of the On the Couch podcast, Lucy Beresford. Hello, Lucy.
Hello.
Lucy, fan of the podcast, you asked to do The English Patient. Why?
Well, it's my favourite film of all time. And the novel is in my top 3 novels, I would say. It's a beautifully written novel, as you said in your introduction. It won the Booker Prize. It also won, in 2018, the best of the Booker over the last 50 years. So everybody loves this book. And everybody loves this film, don't they? How could you not love a book that has on its opening page the image of a penis sleeping like a seahorse? So they had me at seahorse, obviously, and the film is equally compelling.
Duncan, when did you see the film?
So I must have first seen this film in the late 90s. I think not at the cinema, but on what would have been VHS in those days at some point, after it had won every Oscar there is, as I remember. I saw it once more after that, at some point in the early to mid-noughties, and then I hadn't seen it again until this week. And yeah, I mean, I'm glad to have seen it again. I was just saying to Lucy before we started, Rob, it's longer than I remember, but I hadn't quite budgeted enough time to watch it, so I had to watch it in 2 goes. But yeah, I hadn't seen it in a very long time.
Lucy, did you see it when it came out? Had you already read the book?
Yes, so I'd already read the book. I'd been given the book by someone that I was seeing at the time who wasn't English, actually, and I just couldn't believe that he was recommending such a sensual and literary novel when it wasn't his first language. And it's a very complicated structure, the novel, and so I could never quite believe that they would be able to do it justice, but was absolutely drawn not just to the fact that it was going to be my favourite book, but it had such an incredible cast, very kind of the moment people. You had Colin Firth, you had Ray Fiennes, you had Kristen Scott Thomas, who were all very much big names by then. And yet I gather we might get to this later. They weren't necessarily the first choice. Certainly Kristen Scott Thomas was not the first choice. But as you may know, I mean, I've often felt a bit of an imposter on this, listening to this podcast, because I have a very conflicted relationship with war movies in general, because both my parents were in the war. They had very traumatic experiences. My father was a prisoner of war in Changi jail in Singapore, and my mother had been orphaned and was an evacuee. So it didn't get any more tough. And I felt the weight of that on my shoulders in my childhood, I think. And I had even got to the point where I'd made a pact with myself on my gap year to never watch a war movie again. But I did have, boyfriends and male friends at university and when I was working, and they had such a sort of shared knowledge of quotes and in-jokes, and I thought the cathedral was on the other side of the square and sort of things like that. And I just always felt like I was on the edge of a party, not quite knowing how to join in with everyone else having lots of fun. And then your podcast came along and it allowed me to kind of step into that party again. So I just want to say thank you. I kind of feel, as I would, feel that your podcast has been very therapeutic for me. And this was the movie that kind of made me think, oh, well, actually, it's okay to watch war movies because there aren't very many tank battles in it. Let's put it that way.
No, it's a very, I'm not going to ask, is it a war movie? Because it's clearly a war movie. Yeah. You know, it's set in the war. It's about the war. The war is the reason that a lot of the events happen in it. But at the same time, it's not we'll come on to picking scenes, and it's very hard to pick scenes. It's a very, you're right, it's a very unconventional war movie. Did your father watch war films, or did he?
Oh, yes. So this was the point of my childhood. Basically, we
Yep.
just watched war movies on repeat, to the extent that apparently I thought the past had happened in black and white. My mother actually overheard me telling people that, no, it was in black and white. At which point I think she thought she really had kind of traumatized me for life. And my father, who, as I say, was a prisoner of war of the Japanese, was actually very sympathetic towards the Japanese, ended up buying a Japanese car which had the number plate JAP, which he found hilarious. Used to watch episodes of Tenko on the BBC, which I still can't work out how he managed to do that. But he actually reserved his hatred and disapproval for Germany. So it gets in a slightly different vein.
That's
politically,
fascinating.
when Jimmy Goldsmith creates the referendum party and they have one person voting for them, it is my dad, because he feels that England saved Europe. So he would watch them all the time.
It's fascinating that he didn't. I mean, hating the Japanese seems like would have been a reasonable response to being in Changi, one feels.
Yes, apart from the fact that I often wondered whether there was an element of sort of kind of Stockholm syndrome, that actually he was there for so long that you kind of end up having compassion for these very, very brutal people. And I think if there was one very big component of my father's life, it was that he had the biggest heart going. And I just think that was almost a big sign of that.
That's so interesting. I hadn't read the book. I saw the film. I was thinking, actually, I remember where I saw it. I saw it at the Edinburgh Odeon on South Clark Street, which is fantastic, old-fashioned cinema, the sort that even had different sort of tiers of seats. It was the perfect place to see a film like this in a packed auditorium, because when it came out, everyone went to see it. I don't know whether it had won all the Oscars at that point, or whether it was just, one of these ones that everyone knew you wanted to go and see. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. And I don't think I've seen it since then, though, actually, in a strange way. I think I just thought, well, that was great, and I loved it, and I never felt the need to go back to it. I did read the book about 5 years later, and I know that everyone says, oh, the book is very different from the film. And I thought, is it? I don't remember that.
Well, and do you think that's part of the issue? So you went to see it once and you thought great, and you probably really loved the whole kind of visual sweep of it and that sort of the poetry of a David Lean film.
Yeah.
I almost feel it's like the Lawrence of Arabia for my generation. But at the same time, Anthony Minghella has completely changed it. And the focus in the movie is very much on that Catherine Almaty relationship. And that's really not the emphasis in the book at all. I mean, I don't think you meet Catherine for about the first 100 pages, whereas that's the relationship that is thrust center stage. And that's the prism through which we explore the whole theme of the film, which is about love and territory and possession.
I wonder whether it's because... So my best friend at university was a Near East archaeologist, and so he was fascinated by the desert, and I think I probably actually went to see it with him. And by this stage, I would have been out to Jerusalem, where he used to spend all of his summers, sort of between digs. And so I think possibly, even though it's not principally a film about the desert and being an archaeologist, in a strange way, for me, I saw it as a film that was about the desert, and I think that, rather than as a film about a love affair, if you see what I mean, which obviously it's a film about a love affair, but I wonder whether that's why the book didn't seem that different, because if the book is not especially a book about a love affair, it may have been that in my head I was just like, well, no, I'm really here for the desert stuff. And actually watching it again the other evening, I thought, what I'm really here for is the desert.
But that's true. It is about the desert, but the desert is this symbol of emotional aridity. And also it is a film about possession and territory and resisting ownership. Because Catherine at one point says to Almaty, she says, "What do you hate?" And he says, "Ownership." And in that moment, she realizes that he is terrified of being engulfed by love. So she gives him passion, but she also gives him the space to realize that with her love, he won't be overwhelmed. He won't be engulfed. She won't try to possess him, and that real love gives him the chance to do the things that make him the person he wants to be. And therefore, the book one of the critiques about the book was that it was about colonialism, that it was a rather heavy-handed attempt at discussing whether, the Brits did the right thing by trying to conquer the world. And therefore you get this amazing juxtaposition of a film about whether we're making maps and boundaries and who's going to win which bit of territory in a war, and love as an invasion of someone's territory, and whether you want to be found and whether you're able to receive that kind of love.
I think as well, I think watching it this time, having written the book about Desert War, the thing I was much more conscious of, when I saw it the first time, I wouldn't have been able to tell you where Tobruk was or Benghazi or in relation to Cairo. It would all have been very hazy. But the desert as a place that anyone can own is a completely mad concept. The armies go through it, but what are you claiming? What are you possessing? Apart from the bit that you're sitting in, it's one of the odd features of the Desert War is the sort of charging between places where there is nothing. And the line on the map where Egypt becomes Libya, where so much of the sort of the Desert War is dashing back and forth across that line. It's literally a straight line that somebody's just drawn with a ruler, because there's nothing there. It's not following a river.
There's a line in the movie where I think it's Maddox is talking to Almaty, and he says, in a war, if you own the desert, you own North Africa. So was that just not true?
I think my eyebrows were raised at that. I mean, the stuff in the film about maps I have problems with, and we will come back to that, I think, later on, because that's not exactly right, I would say. Okay. Owning the desert is not very useful.
So just one of the elements in this film, which is slightly questionable. Okay.
Well,
Rob, this is such a war movie theatre response. You just watched one of the greatest romance movies of all time that's won every Oscar, and your reaction is, I'm not happy with what they've said about maps.
they lost it. They lost me at that point. No, that's not true. I do enjoy this film. Anthony Minghella, weirdly, actually, until his name appeared on the screen, I'd forgotten that he directed this.
Is this before or after Talented Mr. Ripley?
It's before. He is.
Yeah.
I mean, Minghella is sort of one of British film's real lost talents, and died suddenly about 15 years ago having surgery. And if you look at the films he made, it starts off with Truly Madly Deeply. He's a TV director, and then he makes Truly Madly Deeply with Alan Rickman and Juliet Stevenson, and that's supposed to be a TV movie, but they look at it and they go, actually, do you know what, we've got a movie here, and that gets a cinema release. And then he makes a film called Mr. Wonderful, which I may be the only person who's seen, which is a Matt Dillon film, which is great. I keep looking for it on streaming and I can never find it. And it's a wonderful sort of little New York romance. And then he makes this. And after this, he makes Talented Mr. Ripley and Cold Mountain. And it's one of those things where you thought, I really remember thinking, it's going to be great. Let's see what he's doing next. And then, you turn on the radio and you hear that he died and you think, oh, yeah, aside from the sort of all the tragedy, I did feel a kind of loss for, we could have got 10 or 15 years of amazing films from you. So he's got a producer who wants to work with him, an American producer Minghella has read Michael Ondaatje's book and he thinks he can film it. And Fox agreed to back them, but then in his sort of fantastic Hollywood story, it's like, well, we really like this, but can you change everything about your plan? And they don't want Kristen Scott Thomas. And I suspect Lucy knows the answer to this. Duncan, do you know who they wanted?
No, go on.
Demi Moore.
What?
I know. That would have. Can you imagine Can you imagine 4 weddings and a funeral? Would have been completely different.
The idea. I just, no offense to Demi Moore, I just don't think it would have worked. No. But yeah, so they, and in fact, Fox 3 weeks before shooting is due to start, Fox pull out, and to tread on possibly the most problematic moment of the film, riding to the rescue comes Harvey Weinstein, who does rescue it and says, very happy to have Kristen Scott Thomas make your film. They get the cast and the crew to take salary deferrals, so sort of to cut the budget. Has to be said, it's not clear that everyone ever got paid. The Wikipedia page on this is slightly doubtful. There was a long court case. It might be that Harvey Weinstein is not a very nice man.
Do you think?
Yeah,
who'd guessed?
There's one of these things about, well, did this film actually? Basically, people were going to get paid when the film made money, and maybe the film has never made money, a bit like Star Wars or something. So yes, but when it comes out, it blows the critics away. It wins 9 Oscars. It leads to a boost in sales of Herodotus.
My dream.
It's absolutely huge, and it's one of these ones where immediately people see it, they go, okay, yeah, no, that's absolutely amazing. And it's an interesting question about what it does to the career, because you said, Lucy, oh well, it catches all of these people, just as they're big stars. I was trying to work this out. Colin Firth has just done Pride and Prejudice. Kristen Scott Thomas has just done, 2 years earlier, has done 4 Weddings. Ralph Fiennes, I think with all of them, it takes people who sort of were quite well. It takes people from B-list to A-list is maybe a way of thinking about it, or something, or it secures them as A-list. It's like 2 years after this, you're not going to struggle to cast Kristen Scott Thomas. If Fox are not going to say, why would we want her?
That's very true. I can't remember when Schindler's List came out.
So Schindler's List is before this.
Yeah, so I got the impression that they'd all done, each of them had done one really big, strong film. And therefore there was a little bit of name recognition, but not necessarily enough to completely carry the next movie and then combine together. Plus, of course, it gives Colin Firth in particular the chance to play against type, because he apparently found the whole Pride and Prejudice kind of adulation really difficult to handle and was rather keen to kind of play someone who was on the other end of a relationship, if you like.
Yeah, that's a good way of thinking about it. It just, with all of them, there's maybe, and then after that, it's no, definitely put a big solid tick next to their name. We can put them in a film and it will work. On which note, let's go to the after action report. Quick, Dad. They're on the cable car.
It's not. Look, it's not. It's a novel. It's a novel on screen. It's about slow storytelling and conversations. It's not about certain scenes. And to take the question at face value, you really want to be there for the start, because otherwise you're going to be even more lost. It's already possible to get quite lost.
Well,
so nothing to do with how visually sumptuous that opening scene is, but just the fact that when you get to the end, you'd be like, sorry, what happened? But only in those final scenes do you suddenly realise what that opening scene was all about. Well, maybe this says more about me than it does about anything else. Maybe it's a cinematic Rorschach test. I don't know. But I actually went back to check this last night. But when the biplane is flying over the desert at that very opening, just after the credits, the cinematography is so incredible that those dunes do look like naked bodies. They do look like there are breasts. There is even a 6-pack. I absolutely freeze framed this just to check. And there is a moment where you think, a belly button 6-pack, definitely. And then you can unfreeze frame and carry on. So right from the beginning, you get this very strong sense that this is a film about sex and desert. Yeah, sex and sand.
Sex and sand don't mix, apparently. But I wouldn't know when I wanted to be called. I was sitting there thinking it more, I think, probably than any other film we've done. It's unepisodic. It's all one, even though it's jumping back and forth in time between, I think somebody said there's 40 different time jumps in the film, and there is a period, it's 1944, it's somewhere in the 30s, it's somewhere else in the 30s, it's 39, 40, 40, 41, there's lots of different times, but you sort of always know where you are somehow.
Yes. I think,
or you know, which I don't think that's quite true.
You've got to concentrate. I mean, this is and you should. Like, it's a critically acclaimed film. You should concentrate, but it is one of those ones that you do have to concentrate. This is not something you have on in the background whilst doing something else.
Yes, the key stakeholders in my house were wandering through in the background and not not quite across. Hang on. So what's happening now? Stop
Heathen.
it. I'm watching it.
I blame their parents.
That said, I think when Kip and Hannah go on a date, I think if I were busily writing in the other room, you know, up against a deadline, and someone were watching this, I would say, call me when Kip takes Hannah to the church, because that when I'd forgotten that was in it, and the moment when he hauls her up and she's got the flare, and it's only, I was like, and they got to church, I thought, what are they doing here? And then he hands her the flare, and I remembered what was coming, and that scene with Juliette Binoche's face lit by the flare and swinging in and out as she looks at these frescoes, that's a moment where I feel that the film goes up to 11, if you know what I mean. It just an already sumptuous and beautiful film, for me, finds another level then, and that's the sort of, that's what Anthony Minghella can do. Aside from all the other stuff.
Yes, and apparently the music for that was something that they went over and over endlessly, just to make sure that it really had that sense of being kind of elevated emotionally, but also visually. And because I gather Anthony Minghella was actually originally wanted to be a musician, so he's really passionate about music and had a really strong connection with Gabriel Yared, who did the score, which also got an Oscar. And that visually is really important as a scene, but also it's partly because, again, that relationship between Hannah and Kip is so important for the storytelling, even though there's so much emphasis on the other relationship. That's a beautiful relationship themselves.
Yeah, I think after that, having been summoned into the room to watch that bit, I think that you then find that I just sat down and watched the rest of it, because you then got me. And I remember, I do remember the sensation of watching Kip defusing the bomb in the cinema, and this feeling of it, that feeling that everyone in the cinema was terrified, because you've got the rumbling of the tanks. You can completely understand what his problem is, you know, and how scary it would be, and just this sort of awful sense of doom, and why can't they stop the tanks, and why can't, you know...
No, there's proper jeopardy there. And because the other bits of jeopardy, which are to do with relationships, as Duncan said, they're played out at such sort of a sense of languor with them, and then you get those moments where it's actually intense. I am right by the bomb, and it might go off right now.
Yeah, and that's it. As it were, you could use that in any other war film, and it would work. You've seen Cold Mountain, Duncan, and I haven't seen Cold Mountain, so I haven't seen the other war film that he's done, although someone wrote to us and told us that we should do it, so I think we're going
to. And we should do Cold Mountain. It's a great film. I mean, we should also do The Talented Mr. Ripley, but I don't know how we justify that. So,
well, it's got a line in it. When men play, why do they always play at war? Does that get us in?
It sounds like my kind of war film.
I mean, it's a really, I have to say, I prefer The Talented Mr. Ripley. We have watched loads of times, and we have watched that with the boys, and my wife absolutely loved that, and didn't particularly love this, and wasn't particularly gripped by this. But the bomb defusing scene, I think you could use that as your CV for being an action director in a way, and just say, look, I can direct the next Mission Impossible. Watch this scene. That's how I do it.
So while we're talking scenes, I'll give you my when we come on to discussing what we think of the film at the very end, I will be honest that it is a great film, but my criticism of the film, in as much as I have one, this is the best place to put it, I think, when we're talking about the scenes, is, for want of a better term, you know, I can see why Harvey Weinstein was so keen to back it when it looked like no one was there, because it does feel a bit like Oscar bait, doesn't it? Quite a lot of it. I mean, you know, if you were to design a film to win a lot of Oscars, you would say, we're going to take this Booker Prize winning novel, we're going to have a very, very slow plot, we're going to film it in Tunisia in Italy with lots of beautiful scenes, relatively small cast, and it's going to be about the nature of the nature of human relationships. I mean, that's, you know, if I asked ChatGPT to design me an Oscar winning film, I'm sure it would look something like that.
Well, that is where
That might be quite an interesting point to say, that the context of when this film was made is also quite interesting, because there was an argument to say that it almost reached the peak of that romance genre, because I think Titanic was the following year, which also swept up all of the Oscars. And it wasn't long after that it became very fashionable to mock this movie that actually had this great commercial success.
Yeah.
Critical acclaim, but then everyone said, "Oh, it's too schmaltzy, it's too knowing." There was a famous Seinfeld episode where Elaine just wangs on about how awful it is and how long it is and why did they take so long to die. And I think that absolutely it was always made, and it's made to look like, and it's got that kind of narrative arc which is actually about romance and love and the importance of that, but the backdrop to it is this war, and it's just the way in which it has acquired a certain amount of depth to it because of the novel that it was based on. But actually, fundamentally, we are talking about a love story, and I think that probably reached its peak at Titanic, and we haven't really seen a big epic love movie since. I don't think.
It's I'm just looking at the list now. I've Googled it. So yeah, 1996, English Patient gets Best Picture. 1997, Titanic. 1998, Shakespeare in Love. 2000, American Beauty. And then we're into Gladiator, which is a very different film. But yeah, that's sort of late 90s.
I mean, not in the list of the most awful things that Weinstein did, but one of the many things that is said about Weinstein is that he was an absolutely ruthless Oscar spotter and promoter, and ruthless both in the sense of picking his films, but also in the efforts they would go to destroy and talk down rival films and so on. And again, really not a very nice man. And so it may well be that he looked at this and he thought, I can put this in for the awards next year and it will do well. And by the way, all the actors are foreign and one of them's French. It's the kind of thing that the Academy goes for. And also, I guess if you're him, I mean, there is a
I'm
charity...
sure there's a Kate Winslet line when she does an episode of Extras with Ricky Gervais when she says, to win an Oscar, you've got to play a nun or a nurse.
Yes, and it's Binoche that wins in this.
Yeah. Yes, because the other two don't.
Yeah.
Everyone else does.
But no, so he will have looked at this and thought, in the same way that a lot of sort of film producers look at something and think, do you know what, I know how I can sell that. I know what will be on the poster. And one of the things that he was very good at was saying, I know how I can get this Oscars. And one of the things that will be on the posters is for 20 Oscars or whatever. So yes. She's not so dumb. Are there women in this film? I mean...
There are women in this film, right?
All over the place. Binders full of women. It's, 3 at least, anyway. Have we done a film with more strong female roles?
I'm not sure we have.
No, I mean, once, as it were, if you were an actress, you'd say, oh, yeah, no, you've got to get me into this. If you was me more as agent, desperately trying to... they're good, meaty roles. I mean, Binoche had been a sort of a fixture. I was a student in the 90s, so I was well aware of Juliette Binoche's existence before this film.
And her talents.
And
and someone like Kristen Scott Thomas, who, as you say, after 4 weddings and a funeral, was probably being sent scripts left, right and centre. She writes to Minghella eventually and says, I am the K in your films, because of course that echoes the line that she says to Almashi, which is, am I the K in your book? And there is this, they talk about Kipling. Kip is reading Kipling at one point, and Hannah says, well, I didn't like the Kipling book either. It has too many men, just like this house. So, it's about time we had lots of strong female characters.
Yeah, I
on
mean,
your podcast.
It's still a mainly male film when you think about it. It's about 2 women who are surrounded by men. You've got Binoche, who's in this house where men keep popping up and staying, and you've got Kristen Scott Thomas, who's on this dig where everyone else is a man and everyone else has left their wives behind, and she's been brought along. I mean, it's a great film for the 2 actresses who are in it, if you see what I mean. But it's probably it's not. There are films with more women in that we will get to. Millions Like Us. We'll get to Millions Like Us, which is essentially a film entirely about women, I think.
Well, it's not like Civil War, the movie that you looked at
yeah.
a few weeks ago. It hasn't quite got that same sense that the lead character is female. And there are a couple of digs even in the script where they're all sitting in a bar in the hotel in Cairo, and it's all the men, and Kristen Scott Thomas is having to sit in a different bar because it's chaps only in the long bar, and so they all up and move into the long bar so that they can be with her.
Right. So the out of the, which is absolutely true, that the long bar at Shepherd's was male only, and during the war, sorry, this is things that are in my book that obviously the first time I saw it I didn't know were going to be in my book. During the war, British officers were confident that they could talk freely in the long bar because no women were allowed in, and therefore, right, no spies.
All spies are women, Rob. This is well known.
I mean, it absolutely.
Apart from Colin Firth,
yes,
who we didn't realise was, and even he says, because when Almashi is clearly beginning to sort of take a shine to Catherine Clifton, Colin Firth says to him as he's leaving, "Why are you people so threatened by a woman?" And there is that sort of double edge to that. Well, that's actually because I fancy your wife.
Yes, I mean, here, okay. Do we believe their relationship?
Which one?
Well, actually, any of them. So do we believe the Almashi Catherine relationship? As in, obviously, lots of people did. He's horrible to her because he likes her, and then she decides that she likes him too, sort of thing.
Well, they're both a bit sparky with each other to begin with. When they meet, when she realises that he's been following her around the Casbah, and actually the first thing she does, when there's that incredible scene where she comes back to his room, and she's dressed in this white broderie anglaise dress, and she looks like a bride, and obviously very, very intentional costume choice, I think. And you think they're going to kind of fall into each other's arms, and the first thing she does is slap him, because in the book there's quite a lot of grit before they actually give way to that passion. But again, it's that sense of, I am resisting this passion, I am resisting this love because I know it's going to be so intense, it's going to be so big. And it's that, the way in which it unravels both of them, really. Almashi more than Catherine, I think. I totally believe in that one. The relationship I find hardest to believe is actually the Hannah Kip relationship, despite that incredible scene in the church, and despite the fact that she gives him olive oil to wash his hair and beautiful things like that. If you read the book, their relationship is much more intense, and they think about each other for the rest of their lives. Yeah. And that, I don't get a sense of that in the movie at all, really.
Yes, yeah, Mrs. Hutton was sceptical that anyone would leave Colin Firth for Ralph Fiennes, but that may be a unique
But he is the man who this is the man who sings, "Yes, we have no bananas" around the campfire. Do you really want to be with someone like that when you could be with Ralph Fiennes?
Smouldering, razor sharp Ralph Fiennes. The other thing about this film I realised was that this is actually a tryout for Voldemort. For Fiennes.
With the no nose.
Yeah. I don't believe that someone, when they're casting, I mean, obviously Voldemort at this point is still very much a sort of an idea in J.K. Rowling's head. But when they come to be casting Voldemort, someone will have said, "You know what? I know who can do no-nose acting.
I know who's prepared to spend 5 hours in makeup every day."
Yeah. The casualty list. Did anyone apart from me keep count?
Well, I have a question. Is it deaths that you can actually see? Because, we know that Hannah's, well, I think it's a boyfriend in the movie, but
yes,
in the book it's her father, which again is also really odd because she knew Caravaggio when she was a child in Canada, but in the film that doesn't come across. But for example, we don't see Hardy die, but we know he dies, and it's a very vital part of the plot.
We're definitely including Hardy's death in the count. I thought, did we actually see Catherine die? No, I know what you mean, because I ended up counting 8. But I think there were 4 of them in the Jeep at the start. But even though I knew what was going to happen to the Jeep, as Binoche's friend said, "I love you," everyone in the house said, "She's doomed." People who've watched too many of these films with me. So I think there were 4 of them, but there might have been more. So I think it's about it's less than a dozen.
And presumably nobody dies when the Germans arrive in Tobruk, when they parachute themselves in. There isn't anyone dying at that point.
I don't think so, no. I mean,
No.
again, it's strictly, I can't even believe this is not a podcast where we get upset about details, but the Germans don't parachute. They don't need to parachute into Tobruk. They've arrived. Rommel has driven in. The Cooler King Award for the most gratuitous American character. There isn't. Willem Dafoe is a Canadian. It's an American free film.
Completely.
It's just good they didn't shoehorn Demi Moore in.
No, well, who's in this in a tiny part who goes... I think they're all... I think, as you say, that they're all moving down the runway at various different levels. I don't think there's anyone who's...
Yes, because I thought, actually, the chap playing Hardy, Kevin Whately, might be... Yeah. But actually, he was in Morse.
Yeah, no, he's
long
Lewis.
before
yeah,
that.
He's done our Wiedersehen Pet already. Yeah. I mean, there's no topping our Wiedersehen Pet in your career. I mean, Oscar-winning film.
Yeah, I mean, he may have been the person.
They should have cast Jimmy Nail in this role.
Kevin Whately may have been the person that most people in the cinema recognised when I was saying, he's sort of huge figure on British television. The other, I mean, dude, anyone know what happened to Kip? The actor played him. Because I think it's in there thinking, oh, he's all right in this. What happened to him? And then I realised where I'd seen him. He's pops up in Lost.
I never watched Lost.
Yeah, no. Well, that's it. And he had the weird reverse thing where instead of going from a TV series to Film Heights, he went from Film Heights to a many series TV thing. But he was perfectly good in that too. But yeah, no, there's no one quite. I think it was good. It was good for the people who were in it, but they would all probably have been fine with something else. Best death. What have you got?
It could. So first of all, I had Hardy because it's so unexpected. You talked about the Jeep at the beginning of the movie, and I completely agree with you. As soon as she says, "I'll pay you back when I get back,"
no, you
know that debt is never going to be paid. And really, was it worth it, love? But anyway, so that's coming. I did not see, and I don't know how many times I've seen this movie, and every time I am shocked by the death of Hardy because of when it comes and how it comes. But of course, being the Kristen Scott Thomas obsessive that I am, I just think she dies so beautifully and so poised, and she's always so groomed that one would hope to go that way.
It is the. I mean, well, I don't know that one would hope to die alone in a cave.
No,
of starvation or
hypothermia.
Yeah, I'm going for the Almacy. Just load me up on morphine. Yeah. Dying in a cave.
Quite a good way out.
But her hair looks so amazing.
No, I mean, her death is the death around which the whole film turned. Yeah, I agree with you. Again, actually, I do remember there are sensations about watching this film in the cinema that I remember, and I remember the sensation about Hardy's death, and just again partly because, as I say, it was Kevin Whately. And partly because it comes at this moment where the war's over.
You don't kill off the guy that's in peak practice, Rob shouted.
Sergeant Lewis. He was Sergeant Lewis. Best meme, though. What have you... I mean...
Well, unfortunately, the best meme about the English Patient is the Seinfeld scene.
It's the Seinfeld episode. Yeah. No, let's give it to that. Let's go.
Of which there are 2 or 3, actually. There's the one who says... But I liked the English Patient. And then there's Elaine saying, just die, will you? But I think it's when the guy says to her, I don't think I could be with someone who doesn't like the English Patient. And I feel the same.
Yes, I've reconciled myself to it. Stiffest upper lip.
Well, this whole bloody film is the cinematic embodiment of stiff upper lippery.
Absolutely.
Is it Kristen being left behind? Is it...
Surely it's the man with no lips at all. It's Voldemort on his bed. Or it could be Colin Firth. Yes. So basically, Colin Firth is the heartthrob of the nation. He emerges, he's got this wet linen shirt as he comes out of the lake, and everyone falls in love with him. And here he is, having the worst honeymoon ever. Basically watching his wife fall in love with another man. And he never Okay, so basically he does try to kill him.
He
with
does
a
attempt a
biplane.
murder-suicide.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So I think, I mean, we could just talk about the Dan Buster's Dog Prize there for a moment. I think that murder suicide has become less acceptable over the intervening 25 years, if you see what I mean. I mean, obviously, it was obviously not very acceptable in the 90s, but now that's almost a problematic moment. So it was put to me. Nastiest Nazi. I mean, there's one Nazi in it.
This is the one who gets Caravaggio's thumbs cut off, yes?
Yeah.
And who actually scoffs at his colleague who says, oh, but what about the Geneva Convention?
Yes, I know, they're great. I don't think they were asking about the Geneva Convention in the places where they were chopping off people's stitches.
I mean, you wonder what that guy thought was going to happen when he turned up at work that day.
It's almost a are we the baddies moment. Hang on. Hang on, are we torturing people? I mean, there is this idea that the Desert War was a much more gentlemanly and clean war, partly because it's empty, because there's no civilian casualties, relatively few, compared to sort of making your way across France and this kind of thing. As discussed, there's nothing in the deserts. Perhaps this idea that that North Africa was a more gentlemanly place, but no, it's Jürgen Prochnow from Das Boot, who is the thumb chopping captain. Well, Dan Buster's Dog Prize, the most problematic moment. I mean, Harvey Weinstein killing your wife. Any other nominations?
No, I think on screen it's your murder-suicide, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And off screen, I do wince now when I see the Miramax logo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, you kind of have to think about what conversation would you have had with Anthony Minghella all those years ago to say, look, I know he's got all the money, but in about 20 years' time, this won't look so good. So maybe rethink.
The thing is, there's so many great films from the 90s that now, and the great ones that open with the Miramax, and you go, So it's in company, at least. Loose Lips, best lines. Come on, Lucy, I imagine you can quote
And Lucy's
all of
already
this film.
mentioned it. The best line is the ownership when asked, what do you hate the most? Ownership being owned. Great. Yeah.
Well, I have a slightly different line because it always makes me laugh, partly because of the way in which Ralph Fiennes delivers it in his very Ralph Fiennes way. But he, in the desert, he turned after he and Catherine have spent the night in the Jeep, where their relationship has obviously developed. He sort of looks at her and says, "Could I ask you, please, to paste your paintings in my book?" Which is just such a great euphemism, if ever I heard one. I'm just going to have a pile of paintings by my front door, I think, from now on.
I like to think is still a thing no matter what you put in front of it, which is one of the things about this film. It actually really rewards a second viewing. So watching it for the second time and knowing, for instance, the opening shot, you now know what's happening in a way that you don't the first time. But when he says a thing is still a thing no matter what you put in front of it, it's like, well, this entire discussion is about this man who is known as the English patient, and he's not English. And it's almost on the nose, but it's fine, actually. It's fine. The other line that I noted, in fact, that made me go, that was what it was like, is from Kristen Scott Thomas, when she says that this is a different world, is what I tell myself, a different life, which absolutely was the attitude of a large number of English expats in Cairo. In the words of one of the people who was there, people misbehaved themselves all over the place. It was wartime, partly your family were a very, very long way away. But even before the war, Cairo had been this place that, sort of, Catherine Clifton going out there and having an affair is completely plausible. And in a sense, probably Colin Firth would have been having an affair as well, and everyone's having the gay affair it was a place where people so that they could go and do things that they might not be able to get away with in Tunbridge Wells.
Yes, because there's that conversation with the guy who is having the homosexual affair, which is played so beautifully because it's just literally, it's a thumbnail sketch in 2 scenes. But he's in the car with Almaty, and he says, what people wouldn't understand this, there are feelings that come out in the desert that we can't even really describe. Do you know what I mean? And Almaty sort of says, "Yeah, I kind of know what you mean." that it's a different place for sure. She says, "I'm a different wife when I'm here."
Yeah. No. So all of that is both a good way of expressing it and I think faithful to the reality. I also I liked because for me this is really a film about the desert rather than all of this lovey-dovey stuff. I like the bit where they're in the cab and he's talking about all the different winds, which I'm sure is in the book, isn't
Yes,
it?
it is.
Yes.
Yes.
And I liked it in the book as well. So, Broadsword Radio, completely implausible moments in this film. I have two. I have Juliette Binoche cutting her own hair, which we know from lockdown nobody can do. I mean, well, you can do it, but you don't look like Juliette Binoche afterwards.
And while we're on the subject of hair and makeup, certainly Kristen Scott Thomas winning the award for services to hair and makeup and the sort of impossibly immaculate hair the impossibly immaculate hair that she has throughout the whole movie, apart from that one time when she returns to the hotel after first sleeping with Almashi, when her hair is deliberately very disheveled. So it's obviously a very, it's a directorial choice to have her looking absolutely pristine, even in the middle of a sandstorm.
Well, this brings me to my second one, which is, how long do you guys think Kristen Scott Thomas has been dead when Almashi comes to collect her in his plane?
Good question.
So there is something that suggests it was years, and therefore he shouldn't have been too surprised that she was dead. But in the film, my sense is that it's about 4 or 5 days in terms of how long it takes him to walk. Then he gets captured. Then he escapes from the train. Then he has to do his betrayal, as it were, his betrayal of the Allies. You could do that in 5 days, maybe 6 days.
It feels in the film like it's days or weeks, doesn't it? And
yes.
And when he says, "Oh well, I traded the maps for fuel with the Germans," my immediate thought was, "Well, the Germans don't arrive there until 1941."
Yes.
So, because I have now written a book about this. So, you should have traded it with the Italians. You'd have got there sooner. If we think that the plane crash happens 1930, it's basically an outbreak of war kind of time. That's 1939, so that's at least a year and a half. And in fact, so for people who don't know, Almashi is a real person. And
we will come back to this, I'm sure.
We will come back to this. But it's more likely, by my reckoning, that it's about 2 or 3 years before he goes to get her back. And I think in the book that's clear. I think in the film it's slightly hazy about what exactly it is that he's done. Is it that he's given them maps, or is it that he's led spies?
Well, it's Caravaggio thinks that it's about the spies because he himself was part of the intelligence and was photographed, and therefore his betrayal is very personal. That's why he goes after Almashi, because he thinks he's the one that's contributed to him having his thumbs cut off. But my sense is that he just traded in the maps for the gasoline, and that's in the script. That's pointed very much because before Maddox leaves, he says, "Well, I've got this plane here in case you ever need it, and you've got the maps, haven't you?"
Yes,
really underscores it that those maps, a bit like Chekhov's gun, those maps are going to be very important towards the end of the film.
Yes, so I mean, this led to a discussion in our house about how Kristen Scott Thomas's corpse might have been preserved in the unique conditions of the swimmer's cave. But I think what I would say is she is looking pretty good for someone who has been dead for at least 18 months and quite possibly twice that. Although this is his memory. So in a weird way, where having sort of spotted, having raised this quibble, I thought, well, this is his memory, and clearly in his mind, this is how she looked. So maybe we give him a pass on that one because. Yeah, but yes, I have looking pretty good for someone who's been dead 2 years, it says on my notebook here. Judgment at Nuremberg. Any other completely implausible moments?
No, I'm happy to leave it at that.
No.
Judgment at Nuremberg. I mean, we don't believe in the Geneva Convention. That's
just in case we were unclear if that was a war crime or not. It's nicely flagged for us.
Flagging is the war crime. I don't think there's I mean, there's the whole business of sort of leaving bombs around for civilians and so on and so forth, which is horrible but not a war crime.
Right, I'm going to ask you this question, Rob. You seem the man to answer it. Is
Hit
this
me.
the operation that changed the course of World War II?
No, Duncan. No, it's not. But Al-Mashi is so interesting. This is one of the most. There is a bit of this film that is one of the most fictionalized intelligence operations of the war, which is Operation Condor, which is a great name, which is the insertion of 2 German spies into Cairo in 1942. And Al-Mashi really was a desert explorer. And in fact, it's possible that the Cliftons are based on the brilliantly named Clayton Easts, who were the Clayton East family of Maidenhead, and they are friends with the real Al-Mashi, but it's much earlier in the 30s, and the husband dies of some kind of illness you pick up in the desert, and then the wife does die in a plane accident a little later. She jumps out of a plane that she is flying on takeoff, and for reasons that were not entirely clear, and dies. They are real. Al-Mashi is real, and during the war he joins, because he's Hungarian and Hungary becomes part of the Nazi Empire, he joins the Abwehr, German intelligence, and I don't know whether he proposes it, but there is this mission to insert spies into Cairo by going across the desert. And he puts 2 men in who are, well, actually, I'm going to read from my own book, if you'll forgive me. British counterintelligence will get a sense of the Abwehr's problem in July 1942, when they picked up 2 German spies. Almost everything about the men's story was glamorous. They had got to Egypt by crossing the desert from Sudan under the guidance of a renowned explorer, Count Laszlo Al-Mashi. Once in Cairo, they had taken shelter with a belly dancer and then set themselves up in a houseboat on the Nile. Even the name of their mission was first-rate, Operation Condor. The one part of their story that was disappointing was the actual espionage. This they had found difficult. They couldn't get their radio to work, and they weren't especially good at finding things out. So these 2 spies spend their afternoons at the cinema and their evenings in nightclubs, and their basic hope is that if they spend enough money getting British officers drunk, they will learn secrets. And it turns out that it's a bit more complicated than that. And in a sense, even if you find out something from somebody who's been at the front, by the time they've got back from the front and got to the long bar at Shepherd's or whatever and got drunk and told you, that information is much less valuable because everybody's moved. So these spies are slightly useless, and then they are caught. But this operation has this incredible afterlife. So Al-Mashi gets the Iron Cross for his part in it, and it's written up. It very quickly, this one gets into sort of people's post-war memoirs, and people start adding details to it. One of the first details they add is that the spies, they were using a book code, and the book they were using for their book code was a copy of Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca. And so there are books called the Rebecca Code. There are books called A Foxhole in Cairo, I think. There's at least 2 films about this operation, and 3 or 4 books. There's a really good one called the Rebecca Code that's written in about 1980 that basically everyone makes this much better than it is, and it becomes incredibly persistent as a sort of myth that these guys were good. And in fact, when you because the MI5 reports on them are down at the National Archive, they're available online, you can read them, and you can just see that from the they're rubbish spies, and they crack almost immediately under interrogation. Yeah, so there is absolutely no way that the spies that Al-Mashi gets in were capable of betraying Caravaggio or anyone else to anyone, because they're useless. Now ask me about maps.
Go on, what's your problem with the maps?
So there is a map that matters in the defense of Cairo in the Battle of El Alamein. I think for the most part, it sort of people do definitely get lost in the desert. Navigating a desert is very complicated, but the maps are not enormously helpful, except that when Rommel in 42 gets to El Alamein, at that point there is he is short on fuel and he's got tanks, and he's got to a point where the British have done incredibly detailed surveys. Because the Qattara Depression to the south is basically impassable to armour, everybody knows all the fighting is going to take place in the 50 miles next to the coast. And the British have done incredible survey work on it. And they've created what's called a going map, which is they mark all the ground for how good the going is for tanks. From basically, this is rock hard, which means it's very efficient for tanks to go over it, to this is very soft sand, do not attempt, low gear only is what it says on the maps. And in 42, the British Army comes up with this wizard deception plan, which is that they will make a false going map. And so where the going is good, they will mark it as soft. And where the going is soft, they will mark it as good. And they put it into a Jeep, which they take out into no man's land, and they blow it up. And this map is in a haversack in a Jeep. And this is and this has also been fictionalized, this moment, quite a lot. And when they go back a couple of days later, the Jeep has, they can see that the Germans have gone to the Jeep. And it seems to have worked, because when Rommel attacks in the south, and it's pretty clear that they attack across ground that you would not want to move your tanks across, especially if you were short of fuel, and they burn up fuel much too quickly. That also waiting for them are British anti-tank guns, because the British know which way they're going to come because they've given them this map, is the idea. So there's some to what extent it worked. And again, there's people who've done lots of work on it. But the map is also available in the National Archives, a copy of the map. And indeed, I have a scan of it. And if I remember, I will put it on our Facebook page or something. It's because I couldn't work out how to use it in the book, but it's all beautifully coloured in. So for people who care about maps and tanks, it's a great tank map. That's all I have to say about maps in the desert.
I remember you WhatsApping me the
Yes,
the
I
map.
did, didn't I?
Yeah, when you found it. That's very.
I was so pleased that I'd found it. There it is.
It wasn't exclusive just for me. You've now revealed to the world.
So you've got a whole film that hinges on a map, and it's still not your favourite movie. I am astonished.
Well, because I think it's the wrong maps. I think the Germans knew the way to Tobruk. I don't think that was the problem. Worth dying for. How does this film stand up? Well, Lucy, you go first.
Oh my goodness. Well, it is my favourite film. I think it's beautifully shot. I think it's really powerful in terms of actually not just about the love relationship and the romance of it, but I was thinking about this when I was watching it earlier this week. It is also a film which is fundamentally about the effect of war on people on so many levels. And in that moment, I suddenly thought, oh my goodness, that brings me back to our kind of opening conversation, that actually I did, on some level, have people in my life who were very affected by the war. And then therefore it feels like a really powerful movie to have explored that. So I would definitely die for this film.
Duncan.
Robert won 9 Oscars. I mean, it's
Shakespeare in Love did pretty well, and honestly,
yeah, fair.
I'm not shedding much blood to save that.
Let me rephrase this. It won 9 Oscars, and it is better than Titanic and Shakespeare in Love.
Yes.
No, I think it holds up really well. I mean, I'm going to be honest, I do prefer The Talented Mr. Ripley, which I've seen quite a few times over the last 20-odd years. This is the first time I'd seen this film in 20 years. I am glad I've watched it again. I appreciated it a lot more than when I first saw it. It is a good film.
Yeah. I mean, I think I remember really enjoying it. And then I just never felt that I needed to come back to it. And I'm really glad I did come back to it, partly because you get a lot more the second time around, because of it, the temporal, all of these Easter eggs that are laid at the start of the film are there sort of for you to enjoy. There's one of the American critics, was it Ebert, said it's a film to watch twice, the second time to answer the questions raised by the first time. Yeah. And I think that's a good way of putting it. I'm really glad I came back to it. I agree with you. In terms of if I had wanting to say to someone, this is why, Anthony Minghella is a fantastic director, I would point them to Talented Mr. Ripley first, which I
But would it be fair to say that it's a war movie for people like me who don't know whether they like war movies?
Yes, yeah. Well,
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a war movie. You could have taken a girl to in the 90s, and she would have been very happy.
Unlike Memphis Belle when I walked out of that. Yeah.
Well, we're doing Memphis Belle soon, I hope, but we won't be inviting you.
You can have the guy who took me. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I did. I do actually. I do think I think I probably should have appreciated it more, and I don't think it will be another sort of 30 years before I watch it again. You see what I mean? Though equally, it might be another 30 years before my wife watches it again.
Despite Colin Firth and Ray Fiennes being in it.
Well, because she just feels that Colin Firth has a raw deal in it. Really, that's just she's not a Fiennes woman. So, well, thank you so much for suggesting this and for coming on, Lucy. It's been terrific. And thank you as ever, Duncan.
And thank you, Rob.
And thanks everyone for listening. Don't forget you can help us by filling in our listener survey, by liking and subscribing, and by telling your friends. And you can join us next week when we'll be watching Is Paris Burning?